Welcome to Doing the Work, a Naples Integrated Recovery podcast. My name is Brian, and this space is for anyone who's tired of surviving the same emotional and behavioral loops, whether that's anxiety, trauma, addiction, or problems in your relationships. Around here, we cut the surface level advice and sugarcoating, no platitudes or bumper sticker wisdom. We focus on clarity, responsibility, emotional discipline, and the courage to look at yourself honestly so that you can stop repeating old patterns and start living with intention instead of reaction. Let's get into it. Welcome. Today's episode is going to be a little bit different. I am joined by my first guest ever on Doing the Work, joined by my sister, who just recently celebrated 1 year of continuous sobriety. And with her permission, we're going to share a portion of her speaker meeting and have a conversation about her first year sober. And for anyone that is outside of the recovery community, a speaker meeting is one where somebody tells their story, what it used to be like in active addiction, what happened, and what life is like now. These are usually shared in a closed setting, so I want to be clear that she chose to share this and that I have her permission to do that, and we've talked about that ahead of time. And the reason that I want to put this out there is that there's often a common assumption that 1 year sober means everything fixed. And I get clients who've been in therapy for 2 or 3 months, and their wife is asking, "Aren't you better yet?" And I wanted to show, what does doing the work actually look like? Everybody's experience is different. I have met people who have been sober for 15 years and still have very poor emotional regulation. And I have met people who have blazed through their step work with making their amends and doing their inventory and building self-awareness, and they may knock all of that out in 6 months if they are really, really fast and maybe don't have a lot of wreckage. But something I really liked about this was that this really appears to me like what a year sober does look like. Epictetus uses the example of that a fig tree doesn't grow overnight if you want figs. And I think that the first year of sobriety looks a lot like the roots being built and not so much the canopy and maybe not so much the fruit. I don't know if that sounds like I'm saying you haven't done enough work, but I wanted to share an interview with my sister about doing the first year sober. And so if you're listening and you're in recovery, you will probably recognize some parts of this. And if you're not, I think that this is a very fair look at what early sobriety looks like when somebody is doing the work. And so, without a further ado, I want to welcome Lindsay. So I did come up with a couple of questions that I had planned to ask her, but I'm also going to blindside her with a few that she didn't have any time to prepare for. And I think one of the first to be, I'm kind of outspoken with some of my critiques of peer-led recovery, even though it saved my life. And I know that I probably recommend some form of peer-led recovery, whether that's AA or NA or Sex Addicts Anonymous, Overeaters, or Al-Anon, or Codependents Anonymous, or you name it. I probably recommend 90% of the clients I work with to some sort of a peer-led meeting, and probably 2% of them actually go. Why do you suppose that is? What makes it so difficult to get through the door, to go sit with a bunch of people that you have never met to talk about the ick in your life? What was that like going to your first AA or NA meeting? Which came first for you?
First, I want to say thanks for having me on your podcast. And when I first walked into the rooms of recovery, it was scary. I felt like a new kid at a school where everyone had knew each other, and I was kind of just new, trying to get my feelers in, who I could possibly trust to be vulnerable with.
And as you shared in your speaker meeting, this is already a messy thing because school was already hard enough of trying to build trust and find out who was safe. And so all of us have complex histories that, that led us to addiction. And now you're taking away the one thing that's making life quote unquote manageable, your drugs or alcohol or whatever your thing is. And now you are suffering raw with a bunch of strangers you've never met.
Yeah, I think that these people also had shared experiences. So I try to keep that at the forefront of my mind, but also that these people are sick just as I am, and to take that in account too, with either reservations that I might have with people or judgments, initial judgments at least. I kind of just wanted to put my feelers out there and try and read people versus how they shared and how they just seemed to be with, the group. I wanted to be around the people who attended meetings regularly or people that I felt were very insightful in their shares.
In AA, I heard people say something that may sound kind of harsh, but to say, stick with the winners. Have you ever heard anything like that? Not that there's really truly winners and losers, but more kind of like meeting makers make it, or step followers or step workers make it. What has your experience been with that? What kind of people do you gravitate to? Because it is a mixed bag of what you'll see in peer-led recovery, that there's definitely the court-ordered guy or gal that is in and out 5 times in the meeting to go smoke cigarettes. They spend half the time in the bathroom, and then they're like, fuck this, you guys don't know what you're talking about. And then, there's the crusty old timer that knows everything. One memory that particularly comes out to me, and this is why sometimes these programs can get a bad rap. An old timer cross-talked to me once, which you're not ever supposed to address another person in a room. And an old timer once told me before I got sober, if I told you to strip down into your underwear and push a quarter with your nose down the side of the road to stay sober, you do it. And I remember thinking with sick brain, I would rather fucking die in a ditch than ever do anything from this program. So just because somebody has been sober for a long time or is applying bits and pieces of program doesn't mean that the group collectively is well. And I think that can be a bar to some meetings, because new people come in, they hear that once and they go, I will never ever come back.
I feel that it is very important to listen to people. I feel that we have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason, and just to kind of get a feel for people, because there are definitely the people who have been around for a long time. I think in AA, they call it like dry drunks, like people who have been around for a long time and possibly work the steps, but they're still very sick or angry or cynical, versus I was attracted to the people who were more practicing humility and who weren't just complaining about their life all the time, but turned that more kind of inward.
Definitely. This makes me think about, I wasn't sober yet, but I was going to meetings regularly, which I went to meetings for about 15 months before I actually was ready to do the work and to really get sober. But one meeting in particular, there was this guy like you're talking about, he was just kind of this humble, happy little old man that was just really unbothered. And I
love that. That's the one that you want to stick around.
Yeah. So I went to him after a meeting and I was like, why are you so happy and just so unbothered?
Surrender.
And he was like, it wasn't always this way. In fact, if you had known me from my past life, then you would know that's the fruit of really doing this work. And that really stuck for me because I was like, I'm angry. Well, I'm still angry. I'm 6 years sober and I'm still pissed off, but I do better with choosing my responses. But I agree. I've always kind of gravitated to the people that when we see what I would maybe call bad behavior or poor social skills in a room, and that everyone is kind of looking like, ooh, how's this person going to respond to it? And then they just kind of respond totally unbothered. In fact, makes me think that a mentor that I had at one point, I was bitching about how angry I was at a person who unquestionably was mentally ill. In fact, she had shared openly about that in her shares, and her behavior just frustrated me to no end. And this mentor took his glasses off and he was like, well, what would you expect from somebody who is mentally ill and not well? And they don't do it the way I want them to.
Wouldn't the world be so much better if people did exactly if I could fix, manage, and control everything, I feel like the world would be a better place. But that's what my disease tells me, and I know that's not the truth. I think it's just letting people be who they are, where they are, because everybody's really trying to do their best with the tools that they have or the work that they've done on themselves. And it's more a reflection of them and who they are and where they're at.
Yeah, that's why I think we need a lot of reminders to be intentional. It's like a theme that I talk a lot about on this podcast is living with intention, because even several years sober, I find I still am reactive at first, but if I pause long enough, I can remind myself this is a person who is not well. Or
yeah, you might be able to pause and say the right words, but your face will tell you. At least my face will definitely tell you how I'm really feeling on the inside, even though my words might be a little bit more graceful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there is Bill Wilson had wrote in who knows, probably in the Daily Reflections, but somewhere in the AA literature about restraint of pen and tongue. And I had none of that when I was in active addiction. In my first year or two sober, I got a little bit better about restraint of pen and tongue, but I was acutely aware of how much work my face needed.
It's hard.
And so now I have moments of awareness. Well, actually, so I had an ex that let me know that I had resting bitch face all the time. And one time I was walking back from the restroom and he snapped a picture of me and I looked so pissed off. And he was like, this is just what your face looks like all the time. And this is like year 2 sober. And I was like, how about that? It shows that there's still a lot of work to be done.
Yeah, sometimes we have to have that mirror shown to us because we can't see our own bullshit, you know? Like sometimes people have to show the mirror. I think that everybody's mirror might be distorted a bit from their own perspectives as well, though, so to take it with a grain of sand. But if the accumulation is telling you that you have an RBF, that's something that you might want to take a look at.
Yeah, so tell me, how do you get called out by fellows or peers in your 12-step program? Are you open to that from anyone in the group? Does that only come from your sponsor or your mentor? And also, not to add on 15 questions, which I'm guilty of doing, but how's that different from years past before you got well, when maybe you, I'm assuming, may have been more defensive or reactive to feedback?
I can still be pretty defensive at times, depending on who it's coming from, because I struggle with perfection, so I don't want to do anything wrong. So it can be hard to have some criticism come my way. But I think I take it now. It depends on who it's coming from. If it's coming from somebody that I respect and how they live their lives, and it depends on who it's coming from. You know, if somebody is a mess and they're criticizing me, then I just throw it out the window because, you know, they're a mess as well. But if it's out of somebody that I respect or value how they're living their life, or like feel that they're like on a good path, or like hold their opinion, it depends on to what standard I hold their opinions, you know, and where they are in their walk and how they live their life.
Now, is that a result of pausing and acting from intention? Because I feel like often for me, I do better with that if I pause and think to myself, does this person actually matter to me? But, you know, living in an age where there's so much criticism online and it's so easy to just hide in a comment section and be nasty. As much as I'd like to think that I live that way that you do I actually even care what this person thinks? Even a stranger in Nebraska that comments something, I will be like, that's it. I'm taking the whole fucking podcast down, taking the website down. Like, I can't believe that somebody said whatever. Like, how do you do with that?
I try to turn it back kind of on them, you know, people's opinions. It has to do with them and what they're going through internally, you know. Sometimes it doesn't even necessarily have to do with me.
Okay, I know that probably I've lost most listeners already, because I know that most people only listen for like 15, 20 minutes, or at least that's how long my attention span is. I don't know how anyone listens to like Mel Robbins' podcasts, like 2 and 3 hours long. What did you expect Sobriety to fix that it didn't?
Everything. Plain and simple. I thought that, especially now at a year, that I would be completely healed and that all of my problems stemmed from any substance use. But whenever I removed that, I was just having to sit more face to face with my character defects from more traumas or certain things that have happened, life experiences and defense mechanisms or such as that. Yeah. That it's really who I am, and it not so that the drugs weren't really the problem, they were the solution to my problem, and that I was really my problem, or certain dark parts of me that I didn't like or want to say were really a part of me.
Yeah, now so that is something that I have heard in meetings. It probably didn't make a ton of sense to me in the beginning, and now I can unquestionably agree as a therapist. Say more on what that means, that drugs or alcohol weren't the problem, that they were the solution. What does that mean?
I felt that they were the answer to me in not wanting to face certain emotions or certain characteristics, that they kind of numbed my feelings so I didn't have to feel so deeply or living life on life's terms, or see that I am just a human and, you know, I wrestle with human, you know, just the flesh as anybody else does, you know.
Well, and so very commonly, I agree, drugs, alcohol, or whatever somebody's way of coping is, maladaptive coping, most of these things work until they don't. So what was that trajectory like? For me, I would say my problem with alcohol was somewhere around a 15-year increasing battle. And what did that trajectory look like for you?
I felt that my drug abuse was actually like the safe one. Out of all the ones that you could do, I felt that smoking weed was like safe, you know? And I had been smoking since I was probably 16. And now I'll be 36 this year, so you can do the math on that. But I got to a point where I started to isolate more from just hurting from relationships or just people in general. I was dealing with a lot of grief as well. And I started to feel kind of closed in. It was the psychosis had started. So that was kind of the time for me where I was scared that I had to put it away. I had felt that my higher power for a long time was telling me that I needed to stop this, but I was like, you can have all these other things, but I'm going to keep this one right here, and that's really the one that had broke me.
Yeah, and I'm really glad to have somebody on the podcast to have a discussion about marijuana, because I feel like this is probably one of the most used substances, maybe aside from alcohol. It is just so readily available. I get a lot of clients that will come in and tell me that they have a med card, and I'm like, okay, well, I mean, I could get that for my dog.
It's so easy to get.
Right, it doesn't mean anything. And they're like, oh, well, I'm anxious. I got PTSD. I'm like, well, actually,
It can make you more anxious.
Yeah, any doctor that is giving you that for a mental health condition should probably lose their license, because they are unquestionably making it so much worse. And the psychosis, yeah, that is a real thing that not everybody experiences. But what is psychosis? Tell us a little bit about that. I can do that clinically, but put it through the lens of someone who has lived it as a result of the marijuana use.
My psychosis was scary. It was really terrifying. I felt that, I was the kind of person who was isolating and I wanted to know like the purpose of life while getting high, and I was also doing a lot of grieving too. So at a certain point with the psychosis, I felt that there was like a veil that was torn, or I like peeked into the fifth whatever dimension or something, and that all the information of the world was downloaded into my little human brain, and it was too much for me to handle.
Yeah.
And I was very scared. It was confusing too. It was like a duality, like it's both yes and no, it's right and wrong, but it's both at the same time. It was a lot.
It sounds like overload.
It was overload. It was overload.
Now, I have an episode recorded, I think that's going to come out in May or June or something like that, but I had talked about me trying to make peace with that I may not ever fully know, is there a God or is there whatever? I mean, so I think I am a believer. This is something that a lot of people wrestle with in 12-step culture, of trying to find whatever fits for them with the concept of a higher power, that doesn't have to be a deity. Some people don't even like to use the word God. I feel comfortable to use that, but I think something that had shifted all of that for me was I had one guy in a meeting who said, it's impossible for me to fathom the ocean that is God in the teacup of my human brain, and it sounds
No,
like
it's true.
it sounds like the ocean was being downloaded into your teacup.
It was. It was. It was a lot. I wanted to know everything, and I felt that at that moment when everything was downloaded to my brain, that I was immediately like, I need to close the floodgates. Like, this is way too much for my human brain. I don't need to know everything. I don't want to know everything. I'm just going to trust now. Like, it was too much. It was too much.
Yeah, I that's something that I really try to practice now is, you know what? I don't think I need to know this. Because if I was supposed to know, then an answer would be present. Or maybe if I am supposed to know, then I'll know in the right time. But I don't go seeking or searching or, well, I mean, I do seek and search, but I don't make myself crazy with it either. I'm just kind of like, if I'm supposed to know, then in the right time it'll be revealed.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, so part of your story, which I'm going to share probably in a separate episode because this is getting long, you were Baker acted.
I was not. I voluntarily went in. They said that I could. They're like, you can either choose to stay or we'll Baker act you. And my ego would not let that happen. So I voluntarily stayed. Okay, get it right. I was not Baker acted.
So you were voluntold.
Yes.
Okay. So you agreed under duress that you were going to be Baker acted.
Yes.
Okay. Fair enough. Thank you for the correction.
We need to clarify.
Thank you for the correction. So you spent some time in a crisis unit because of substance-induced psychosis. And, well, I'm sure that was kind of terrifying, being in the David Lawrence Center.
Oh, yes. It was. Because they have cameras watching you at night. And people come and checking you in the middle of the night. Like, it was very scary. They would come in at... It seemed like 5 a.m. and check my blood pressure. And they're like, your blood pressure is very high. And I'm like, because I'm scared. I am paranoid right now that somebody is going to come and get me because I know all the information of the universe. That's why I came here, for protection.
Yeah. So, well, and now you were in they have different levels there, right? There's the full-blown crazy wing. You were in the less crazy
I was in the
wing.
acute crisis.
Acute crisis, yeah. I guess I'm not supposed to say crazy as a licensed therapist, but let me tell you this. When I have clients in a meltdown that say that they are suicidal in the session, we get them regulated because I let them know, if we don't get you safe in this session, you're going to have to go someplace very unpleasant that I don't want you to end up, and
that you're going to have a resentment for.
I don't think that you are actually suicidal. I think you feel awful and you just want to not feel awful, right? But so she didn't get to experience the full CSU, but when I let clients know what that looks like, imagine a 400-pound man who has taken off all of his clothes, standing on top of a table, screaming, "Don't fuck with Jesus!" as they stick him in the ass with the sleepy time shot. The CSU is not a place that you want to spend an extended amount of time. So when I have clients that are on that borderline of a psychotic episode from their THC use, I let them know, you are potentially going to spend a weekend in Happy Valley. And what was Happy Valley like for a weekend?
I was scared. I was scared a lot, but I started developing friendships with the people in there because I felt compassion for them and empathy because I'm like in the same situation. But of course I felt that I was better off, that I'm like, I'm not nearly as crazy as this guy. But yeah, I mean, I developed friendships with the people that I was in there with for that time being. But
well, so let me ask this. there is this concept of being California sober, and people who say that they are sober but continue to use THC. I'm not asking you to be a spokesperson for your 12-step fellowship, but what's your experience on this? Is this compatible for someone to be quote unquote sober but still using something that makes them feel good, better, or different?
I don't believe so. Because if that's the case, then I would have been sober until I was 21 when I really started using at 16. So, because I was drinking, I would drink occasionally, but marijuana was really my drug of choice. So, no, I don't think that you're actually sober if you're using a substance to change how you feel.
Mm-hmm. Which I want to specify as a mental health professional. I am not anti-medication. In fact, some conditions really do require, a mood stabilizer or an antipsychotic or an antidepressant, and that is not what we are saying here. But if I pretty much always let clients know, if you are taking a medicine that makes you feel immediately different, like a Xanax or something like that, this is probably a hard no for recovery. What about CBD? Is that okay if it's a...
I don't feel that CBD has any psychoactive properties to it, so I feel like that is fine. I think it really depends on the person. I don't feel... CBD isn't going to make you high. I think that there's a lot of areas of where you can draw the line versus... It depends on the person, even with people drinking non-alcoholic drinks, like there is a tiny percentage of alcohol in it. Mm-hmm. And for some people that might send them off the rails. And for others, it's just, it isn't anything, it helps them from not drinking. So I think it really depends on the person, because you can boil down to like not drinking coffee then. It depends on the extreme that you want to go to, because technically caffeine is a drug, and a lot of people when they first get sober become caffeine addicts. I mean, I know I was. I was drinking so much coffee. So
yeah, I think well said that sometimes people will apply like a one size fits all for things in recovery. And that's why shares should really be framed like, this is my experience. Take what's helpful, discard what's not. I'm just talking about me. Because I think you're absolutely right that maybe somebody could do a CBD gummy. I don't even know if that actually would do anything. Or somebody could have a NA beer. Or I know people that have been sober and attend 12-step meetings that have mocktails parties. I don't really understand that, but I guess it does make sense if I think about how if social gatherings usually centered around alcohol or drugs or whatever, that if you're going to do something that feels like you're reenacting something like that, I guess that kind of makes sense. Something that Bill Wilson wrote that I think fits here, that's in line with what you're saying, is he talked about if you're going into a bar, if you're a person in recovery, you shouldn't be like terrified to go into a bar, but more ask yourself, like, what's my intention of being here? Like, do I have any real reason to be in this bar, or am I trying to get a little bit of vicarious pleasure? And so, I guess that'd be the question to ask is, what are you hoping to get from using this CBD, or what are we trying to emulate here? Agree?
Agree.
Okay, so you get discharged from DLC and then sober forever afterward. Is that right?
No.
No. So lapses are common?
I wasn't ready to completely surrender. I felt with my marijuana use that I wanted to stop because I was afraid from being in psychosis, but I was still drinking. And occasionally when I would drink, if I was around certain people who were using marijuana, I did it probably like a time or two afterwards, and then immediately felt this like, oh shit, like this isn't something I should be doing, like that like heat that comes up in your body, or where you feel like, oh shit, like I felt like I'd be called into the principal's office or something, you know, that feeling, maybe a bit of anxiety or fear, I don't know.
So what's your thought on like kava and kratom and the recovery community? Oh, your eyes opened up really big. Yeah.
I don't know too much about kava. I usually try to stay away from it. Kratom, no. Kratom's like an opiate. Like, I was using kratom for a while after when I was trying to do dry January. I was trying not to drink alcohol, but I was drinking kratom, which is basically like an opiate instead. So I don't think that I think if you're drinking kratom, you're definitely not clean and sober.
Right. Yeah. I have seen a handful of either clients or also even people with years sober who opened that door a little bit, because it's like you can find it I guess I never
get it at the gas station.
So I never go inside. So yeah, apparently they've got like all sorts of
you can
kava,
also buy
kratom, all that stuff.
Like they're called Delta 9 carts too, cartridges. It's like synthetic marijuana that you don't need a license for. Yeah.
Yeah, so I have a client who recently had talked about a lapse with that, and had
it's very slippery.
Right, the thought process. It's at a gas station. I mean, like,
No.
really, what's the big deal? And she shared a similar, like, immediate, like, oh my God, this is like really scary. Of like, I'm fucking high.
Yeah, it will definitely take some pain away.
Yeah, I think so. We are going to Italy in April, and
I'm so glad to have a sober buddy. This is my
Yeah.
first time going to Italy, not guzzling a bunch of wine, so
Right.
I'm very happy to have a sober buddy with me in this experience.
So I have had clients ask me, like, you know, well, so you've been sober for several years. You've done a lot of work on yourself. You don't think that you could have, like, you couldn't even have a mouthful, a sip at a wine tasting? You're shaking your head. Tell me what your thoughts
It just
are with
reminds
that.
me of that really famous saying that our mom says, if you don't want to slip, don't go where it's slippery,
Oh,
you know?
yes.
So, but I think that looks different for everybody too. You know, I'm going to be honest. There's sometimes after I go diving, I was so used to having like a drink or something afterward. Well, more than just a drink, and now, like, if I'm feeling that way, I'll have one NA beer and, like, I'm good. You know, like, I don't have the desire to want to feel different anymore. So that's been relieved. But, like, it's like a familiarity.
Sure.
I don't know. But it's not in the intention of wanting to feel like I need a release or anything like that. It's just, you know, sometimes I miss the taste of wine or beer, you know?
Yeah, I think you describe it well, that it is a slippery slope. That's exactly what I tell clients. I mean, again, now, neither of us are speaking on behalf of any 12-step program, just two people sharing their experience. And I'll tell a client, could I potentially do that? Probably, but the risk.
Why even open the door?
Why would if it took me so long to get sober and my life was so fucked up in active addiction, and I hated everything about myself, and it had taken me right to the brink of either suicidality or drinking myself to death or both, why would I even want to why would I even want to try? And I think that is really, that's really the meat of step one. Now, there's a misconception that people have. Well, the first step is saying that you have a problem. What does step one actually mean for you?
Step one for me means surrender. And it's a constant thing every day, not just with substances, but that like I can't control anything that is outside of me. And sometimes I have a hard time just controlling myself. Like I can't fix, manage, or control any situation that's outside of me. So it's more just a surrendering to living life on life's terms.
Mm. And so what about the concept of powerlessness and unmanageability? So in AA, those are the two core components of that. Is it the same thing in NA, that those are both important parts of step one?
Yes.
And so powerless, meaning once I start, there's really...
It's hard to close the door again.
Yeah,
I've heard it said it's like you had finally caged the gorilla, and opening it is like letting the gorilla out of the cage. So...
And the other part of that being the unmanageability, which means once that door is open and the gorilla can get out,
I can't control the gorilla.
Yeah, it's gonna... I don't even know what's gonna happen, but probably it could include handcuffs and a mugshot and...
or ruining relationships.
Everything.
Yeah.
Everything. So with that, why would I even want to see what...
Is it worth it? Is it worth sacrificing
like?
that or putting it on the line?
Right. I'll just have a seltzer water. Well, so we talked a little bit about how a lot of social settings surround drinking, or people bringing their bong out and having a social smoke session. So how did your identity change once weed wasn't part of that?
It's actually funny because I did that Myers-Briggs testing after like so many months clean and sober, and my personality actually did change from judging to more perceiving things. I feel like they say in the rooms that you have to change your people, places, and things. It depends on who you're around, depending on how easier it is to maintain on this path of wanting to live a clean life or sober life. I think that I had built more genuine relationships that weren't necessarily transactional. So, and just more genuine connections and relationships with things that we have been through in our past, and familiarity of people's other experiences in life.
So, now, I mean, alcohol is everywhere, but I'm curious, what is your experience like if you were to go hang out with somebody that isn't active in peer-led recovery? They don't have necessarily the same values or direction or goals as you. You go over and hang out with this guy or gal, and they pull a pipe out and just light it up. What happens for you when that happens?
Nothing. No. I don't feel an urge. It doesn't really bother me. I try not to be around it because I feel after so long of being around it continuously that would be a little bit more slippery for me. But if I'm hanging out with somebody occasionally who is actively using, it doesn't bother me right now because I was so afraid from the experience that I had been through.
I use this guideline that I don't care if someone wants to drink around me, or it doesn't bother me to go to a party where people are drinking, but the moment that somebody appears impaired, I'm out of there. Like if someone wants to come up and talk, oh my God, I heard that you're a therapist. I'm out of here.
I'd much rather be at home reading a book or crocheting or making something.
Yeah, so how has life outside of just the rooms, but in active addiction, there's a lot of isolation and just being alone with our substance of choice and self-medicating. What does that look like now? Now you have your place is called the Zen Den. What's your place like, and what has changed now sober? Hold on, before I ask that, I talk about how in active addiction there was one time I dropped in on Mom and she was doing a jigsaw puzzle at like 11 o'clock and she was squirreling. You know that noise that she makes where she's just like,
yeah.
And I was like, this is like fulfilling for you, like just doing a jigsaw puzzle and like swirling, because my brain is like so sick that I need constant attention and novelty and excitement and dopamine. And here's this little old lady just putting together a puzzle, just happy about life. What's that like a year sober as opposed to active addiction?
I feel that I have more connections. Like I have more people coming over to my house for like a fellowship type of thing. But I definitely like my time alone and being in solitude, and I still do the same things just without substance, you know. Either I picked up reading a lot because it's a really nice way for me to disassociate from reality is reading fiction. But I still like to sit at home and take care of my plants or my animals or crochet or study theology and conspiracy theories. Sometimes I need to go outside and make sure I touch some grass, but it's kind of the same, just without substance.
So there is a concept called hedonic rehabilitation, which is where people in early recovery who have really like fried their reward circuitry have to learn how to have fun sober. What was that like for you? Like, so for example, I have some clients that if they have been using drugs and alcohol for a long time, then to do normal pleasurable things like probably tending to your garden or reading a book that you enjoy or even having sex, that some of them are just kind of like meh because I don't have my substance of choice. Was there any kind of like a period where you had to like figure out how to do life sober or how to have fun sober or be okay with just being sober without that feeling?
I don't know. In my early recovery, they suggest not to be in a relationship in the first year, and I was. That relationship had actually introduced me to the rooms, and there was enough ups and downs with that to keep me stimulated or my nervous system feeling not normal. Yeah, so but eventually I got to a point of where I was sick of the pendulum swinging from one extreme to the other, that I just wanted peace and wanted quiet, and I wanted like almost boring because it felt more safe and my nervous system was regulated and feeling peaceful. And now like a decaf cup of coffee at night with creamer in it, I'm like, ooh, you know, just coffee. Like
I could make like a chai tea and be like,
I love it.
I'm just so happy.
It's so
right
great.
now.
I know. I remember a long time ago when we were both, I think, we went to the gym one time. We were like, what do people do sober and clean? Like, how it must be so boring. And it's not, I don't know. I don't get bored easily. And if I do feel bored or lonely or something, that I'll just pick up the phone and call someone, or go to a meeting, or go do something with someone, and then I'll get that stimulation in that way, or connection.
Okay, well, so now this is something that especially people in active addiction struggle with. I have probably written my name and number down on 100 cards, or the pamphlet that has the names, and only one time ever in 6 years has someone ever called me. What was that like for you to retrain yourself to have to say, I'm struggling, or I'm lonely, or I'm whatever?
It was definitely hard. I took the suggestions in the beginning that they give you about going to 90 meetings in 90 days and getting a sponsor and calling that sponsor every day and calling another addict. And there was a lot of days, especially with my job, which I love, but I'm interacting with people so much that I didn't want to do these things. But it trained me to reach out, to go do these things whenever I'm feeling especially a certain way.
Yeah. It's muscle memory, and I try to give people the example that when I was in the police academy, I would guess that a police officer has practiced on the line at the range, pulling their gun out of the holster probably somewhere maybe near 1,000 times, but by the time that you graduate that way, when the shit really hits the fan, you're not sitting there trying to figure out, do I put the hood down? How do I unsnap this? Like, you've done it so many times that you don't even think about it. And I think you're right on that we have to do those reps, even when we don't want to call somebody, or everything feels fine, because if you've done it 100 times, and you've built that as a new muscle memory, that when you're actually getting lifed, you can actually do it when it matters.
I think it's important to build those foundation of relationships too, even if it feels mundane, or I don't really want to call somebody, just reach out for a little bit to get connected, because whenever shit really does hit the fan, that you have like at least a foundation with these people, and that you feel that you can be vulnerable with them. So,
well, and so in the speaker meeting that I'm going to use for another podcast later, you had talked about even the ability, though, to be vulnerable and to be open, even with someone that you didn't know. Because was it a stranger to you was it Thanksgiving that you had mentioned in yours?
No, it was somebody that I have known in the rooms, just from like seeing at meetings and like building friendly interactions with. Okay.
So it wasn't a complete stranger, but in this story you had talked about feeling in your feels.
I was so not okay that day.
On Thanksgiving.
I didn't want to use, but I didn't want to live.
Yeah. Okay, now say more about that, because I think this goes back to step one. I really believe that if someone has really worked a step one, that once you start, that you're powerless, you don't know what the outcome is, if you're going to be able to stop or not, and you know that if you use, that life is going to be unmanageable, it's going to be painful. I think that when you've got a good step one, someone is not going to drink or drug again. But I do believe also the reason we need the other steps, or why we need some sort of recovery program, even if it's outside of a 12-step program, is that we can become so miserable sober that suicide seems like an easier or better option, or being not living seems like an easier way than everything. So say some more about that.
I was in so much pain dealing with grief on Thanksgiving from our father passing away, that I didn't want to use, because I knew that it was no matter what, like not using no matter what. And I didn't want to deal with not only being so engulfed in my grief, but also feeling shame from using or regret. Like I didn't want to feel those emotions as well. So I was really hoping on my way, I had trained myself to go to these meetings, and I was driving on the way to a meeting, not necessarily that I wanted to end my life, but it would be much better if a drunk driver took me out. And I finally got to that meeting, and somebody that I'm friendly with was asking me how my day was, and I'm like, and he had also expressed that, if most people, like I shared in my speaker meeting, if somebody's at a meeting during the holidays, it's usually because the holiday is pretty hard. And he had expressed to me how hard it was for him as well, and that I just felt like seen and understood, and like I'm glad that I'm not the only one suffering, like there's like empathy and compassion and feeling understood and our suffering together.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. A couple of weeks ago, I recorded a podcast about why we heal more and why we get more out of groups than we would from just one-on-one therapy. And that was one of those principles, is that there's like this universality that, we're not alone. And when we're in it with somebody else, even if we don't even have an immediate solution, just the fact that we are not alone, we're not unique in our grief and experiences. And sometimes, they say like a problem shared is a problem cut in half. Maybe it doesn't feel quite cut in half, but definitely.
I definitely felt lighter after that meeting, or just, I did feel better. Like I felt like a release, kind of, It still doesn't mean that it was difficult and not hard, but it definitely had lessened the feeling of not wanting to be here anymore.
Right. What does a bad day look like now as opposed to a year ago, or maybe a year and change ago before actually being sober?
I feel a bad day now. It really depends on where my baseline is. Like some days if my social battery is completely drained and something else happens on top of it, that it can feel really, really heavy and just consuming, especially now not using. My bad days back then had more regret to them. But I didn't feel like they felt as engulfing as now, because I had numbed my emotions for so long that the pendulum swung to the other side and they were completely consuming. So the bad days and early recovery were worse because of not numbing that pain with substance.
How did you make it through a really, really awful day? Because there are a few I can think of in my first year sober. I think it's so much work, and I was a child protective investigator, totally burned out, doing thankless work, and I had a handful of days that I was just like, thank God it's 8 o'clock, I'm going to bed. I'm just so glad I made it to 8 p.m. and it's now a reasonable time for me to try to go to bed. Thank God I made it to bed sober today. I didn't use.
Yeah, sometimes I would definitely do just a hard reset, like when you turn your computer off, like going to bed early and tomorrow is a new day. Sometimes, now I'm not perfect, obviously. Sometimes I would reach out to people and tell them what's up, and sometimes I wouldn't, and I would be completely consumed in my emotions, but I still didn't use and just went to bed early or something like that.
Mm-hmm. And next day, what was the result?
I didn't feel as shitty.
Right, yeah.
I felt, better to some extent.
And I think that, one thing that's commonly said in AA is like, play the tape forward. And that's a really great intervention to use.
Yeah, I didn't want to ever feel regret for, not only was I feeling so crappy, I didn't want to add regret on top of it.
Right. Yeah.
So
You might feel good for the evening, but next day, now...
yeah, and then
you're-
there's the regret and the shame, and now I have to go pick up a white key tag, and like I don't know, maybe it's part of my ego too, or like my pride. I'm like, I can't let that happen. Like,
Now, for people who are not familiar with 12-step programs, white key tag means what?
it's an act of surrender that it usually means that you had a lapse.
So you're letting the group know, I'm starting the clock over
It's waving
again.
the white flag again, yeah. So you're starting the clock over.
And usually there's so much shame in that I have clients that if they have a lapse or a relapse, that they are just like, I can never go back to that group
Yeah.
again. I can never be seen again because I had 6 years sober. I'm a therapist running this whatever. I cannot let anybody know that happened.
I think
And
it
what
takes
would
a
you
lot
say?
of I think it takes a lot of courage and humility, and I think that shows a strong sense of character. You know, it's okay to fall down, but just not to stay down and to pick back up and brush your shoulder off. And if people are going to judge you for that, it says everything to do with them and not really about you.
Yes, right. Yeah, and so for listeners that don't know the difference between lapse and relapse, gosh, there's even licensed mental health counselors that get these two words mixed up. Relapse is fully going back to the way things used to be, and lapse is I made a mistake, or I made a bad decision, or I had a bad week, or I did whatever, I got off the wagon, but I'm getting back to it again. And addiction is a chronic lapsing and relapsing medical condition or disease, and there is no cure for it, and so it is just expected that lapse is going to be part of the process for a lot of people. And so there's so much shame that keeps people from being able to start over again. But what have you seen when somebody who had a year or 3 years sober lapses, and then they come back and they say, I'm here to get my white key tag? The whole room is disgusted and judging.
No, they're
and...
usually always cheering.
Right.
I think that if they are judging and stuff, they keep it to themselves. But whenever somebody surrenders and goes to pick up a white key tag, the room is cheering them on.
Yeah. And I don't even think that anyone judges. Maybe it's just, more than anything, it might just be surprise. But there shouldn't even be surprise because, you know,
It's normal.
Yeah, we're all like the physiology and the biology is the same. And there was one AA speaker that is a circuit speaker, someone that shares their story like nationally. They go around to give people hope. And I had learned so much from her. She had like 20-something years sober, a well-known circuit speaker, and I found out that she had lapsed. Now, of course, no judgment, but kind of a surprise, though, maybe, of like, wow, like even a circuit speaker, this can happen.
Yeah, I think we have to be very careful, especially people who've been in the program for so long, to not put people on pedestals at all,
Right.
because we're all human and we all suffer with the same disease. So
Right.
it's really important to not put people on pedestals.
Yeah. Not put anyone on a pedestal. I think that's important. And also, this is like one of the reasons why peer programs and that anonymity part is so important, because to an outsider who has never been to a meeting or really doesn't know anything about addiction, if you got somebody that they're 90 days sober or they're 1 month sober, and then their whole Instagram feed becomes AA saved my life, AA everything, I'm a changed man, I used to piss the bed every night, I used to be such an asshole, I changed everything, AA is the best thing ever, and then this guy then drinks again 2 months later and has pictures of them drinking and whatever, of course, it makes sense that an outsider would be like, huh, well, AA doesn't seem like it works, or NA doesn't seem like it works. And why these programs, they don't want to be recognized as like, AA works or doesn't work. Almost universally, if you talk to somebody who has had a lapse or a relapse, one of the first things that they will share with you is, I stopped. I stopped going to meetings. I stopped calling people. I stopped doing the literature. I stopped praying. I stopped surrendering. I stopped all of that stuff. And then, of course, well, what's only naturally going to follow? But love that they're always welcome back, never with judgment.
Of course. I think that we deal with a lot of, you're going to have your inner turmoil from that in itself. And what your committee in your brain might be telling you of what people might be thinking.
The shitty committee. Wow, okay, so a little bit past an hour. I should probably be dialing it in shortly, but let me see here. I wanted to ask, what still feels fragile or unfinished? So you're a year sober. Aren't you done with the step work?
14 months.
Aren't you finished? Aren't you fixed?
No, I thought that maybe I would have been by this point, but it's not a race. This is a lifelong I don't want to get burnout either. It's a lifelong commitment. So I think it's just being gentle with myself and where I am, and versus where I expected myself to be at this point. Whenever I first walked into recovery, I saw people with a year and I was like, wow, that's so much time. But now I still very much feel like an infant, and that there's so much for me to learn still.
Yeah, and I think that goes back to not putting anyone on a pedestal, and that at any point we should all remain teachable. And the moment that somebody thinks that they have it all figured out,
you're in trouble.
That is not that is a not safe place to be for your recovery. Totally agree. In case anybody who has been listening to this has had some interest in maybe attending their first meeting or making some changes, what might you tell a brand new person who is at the very beginning of their journey?
What I would tell someone else is to be gentle with yourself, and what I would tell myself 6 months being clean versus a year now is that I don't know everything, and it's important to listen to other people's experiences and what they've been through. What's it? Listening to the message and not the messengers, because sometimes on the outside we can have a bit of reservations depending on who might be sharing, but if you're listening more with like your heart, you can get a good message from people that you wouldn't expect.
Has there ever been anyone that maybe, well, this is going to be some real honesty, that you unquestionably judged when you saw them, and then you heard them speak and you were like, oh wow, okay.
Of course. Of course.
I went to one meeting that so this is like my law enforcement side definitely coming out, but I saw this guy with the face tats and everything, and I had already decided you should be in prison somewhere, and he had like the most profound recovery share when I was brand new, and I was like, okay, I don't know anything about anything.
Yeah, it can be quite humbling to ourselves too, not to judge people based on experiences, but of their character.
Yeah. All right, well, so an hour and 10 minutes in, I think this is probably a pretty good place to throw the anchor out. And is there anything that I didn't ask you that you really wanted to say today, or that you think that people should know about either getting sober or 12-step culture or anything like that that you additionally want to share as part of today?
I think there was a question about what was helpful versus what was not helpful in my recovery. And I would say taking the advice that they gave in the rooms of recovery that I'm in to do 90 meetings in 90 days and to get a sponsor and get a home group and get numbers of other addicts and call those addicts, that was very helpful to me. I can only think of one instance that was, sometimes people's opinions aren't going to be helpful because it's their own perspective of certain things. Like I had somebody who had been around for quite a while, and this person is known to be kind of angry, and I had just gotten my 1 year, and I was expressing to a few people how hard this 1 year was for me from just things that had happened in my life. And this person had said, the first year is easy, just wait, it gets harder. And I just clapped back at this guy, and I was like, I'm pretty sure I don't bury my dad every year. So sometimes people's opinions or their, you know, you have to be careful, you know, about taking on other people's perspectives.
Sure. Well, yeah, this also makes me think, you know, so like I had to go to treatment, and when I got my first 30-day coin, I was already forward thinking of like, ooh, what's my speech going to be like at a year sober? And there was no 1 year sober speech, but I did have a sponsor who wrote inside of a book, I think it was a book on working on your character flaws, Drop the Rock. And the inscription in that was, congrats on a year sober, now the real work begins.
Oh, I hate like, that
what
saying.
What the fuck does that mean?
I hate when people say that, because, I mean, from my experience, the 1 year was very, very difficult because of grieving, just the emotion, like the pendulum. I had been numbing my feelings for so long, and not only was I having all those feelings flood back in and learning how to regulate them, but I'm also dealing with the loss of my father. I was in a relationship that wasn't completely healthy. So, you know, sometimes people don't know what the hell they're talking about, depending on, they're projecting their reality onto you versus what everybody's story can look different.
Absolutely. Right. And I think that is another thing, and why it's important in peer-led recovery that you're not speaking universally, but instead you're just sharing what your experience has been with this stuff, because for some people, they may be able to, someone who is truly not full-blown alcoholic, but maybe got a DUI, maybe their use was problematic, maybe they go to a couple of meetings and they get their shit together and they can have a beer and not fuck their life up. Or probably there's someone out there that can do some CBD or smoke a joint on a Friday night and not turn it into something else.
See, for me, that's very slippery. It will start slow. It will start like, I'll only do it on the weekend, or I'll only do it Friday, Saturday before I go to bed. And then it slowly starts slipping into other areas. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm only going to do it after work. But then it starts to become everything. It was, when I was in full blown, it was my pre-workout, it was my post-workout, it was my appetizer, it was my dessert, it was everything.
Well, and so I think it's important that we don't speak in absolutes as for everybody else, right? Because I had shared some trauma work that I was doing with a past mentor, and he kind of scoffed at like how silly trauma work was when the answer was more step work. And so truly it should be about find what the right thing is for you. For some people can go to 12-step programs and they can get and stay sober from going to meetings. Other people need a full program. Other people, like me and you, need meetings and step work and a good trauma therapist and a support network and all of the things to constantly...
It takes an army.
Yeah, it certainly does. All right, any final thoughts?
No, I think that about covers it. Thanks for having me.
It is my pleasure, and thanks for joining me. Congratulations on a year or 14 months sober, and keep doing the work. Thanks for being here. Thanks for spending the time with me. If you found this episode helpful, please share it with somebody who may need to hear it. Be kind to yourself, be kind to others around you. Remember that we're all doing the best that we can with the tools that we currently have, and we are all capable of growing past them. If you'd like to reach out or connect, send me an email, brian@naplesintegratedrecovery.com. I hope to hear from you there. And in the meantime, thanks again for listening, and I'll see you on the next one.